Hello and welcome to another SCARFS video where I look at what I think are the 6 most common problems with sentence structure when you're looking at writing. We are up to the F, and the F in my system stands for fragments. Now, sentence fragments are just another way of talking about incomplete sentences. So when we're talking about a sentence fragment, it's an incomplete sentence. So it helps to know what are the sort of essential components of a complete sentence to be able to then identify when we've got a fragment. Okay, so the basic rules of a complete sentence are that we need to have a subject. Every sentence needs to have a subject, a verb, and it needs to be a complete thought. Okay, it doesn't rely on any further information to make sense. Okay, so that's what we need for a grammatically correct complete sentence. Now, they can be very short. So, something like Jane drove. That's a complete sentence. It's got the subject and it's got the verb and it's a complete thought. Jane drove. Another example might be Bob sat on the chair. Okay, so we've got our subject, Bob, the verb to sit, and in this case there's an object saying where Bob sat, and I'll come back to the topic of objects in a little while. But for now, you can see that these are both not sentence fragments because they fit the criteria of a complete sentence. Okay, where we run into trouble is usually in one of two areas. The first is if we're missing the verb. So for example, if this just said Bob on the chair, we've got a fragment, a sentence fragment, an incomplete thought. Okay, the other, and this is the big one, the other area where we run into trouble is when we've got a subordinating conjunction at the beginning of the sentence. So these are words like because, after, although, which, if, because they create a dependent clause. They leave us hanging, leave us needing more information to make sense. So if we take our Jane example and we put one of our subordinating conjunctions, let's go with because. Okay, then we've got because Jane drove. Now we've got a sentence fragment. It is this subordinating conjunction that's called a subordinating conjunction because it makes this clause subordinating. It needs a main clause. The sentence is now without a main clause, and so it doesn't make sense. Now, this is the culprit of a lot of sentence fragments. I think what happens is you start writing, or a student starts writing, and starts a sentence with a subordinating conjunction, which is fine in itself, but then kind of keeps writing and loses track of how the sentence started. And so there's no actual main clause that ever comes in the sentence, and you end up with a sentence fragment. So, how do we fix these problems? Well, if it's the missing verb, then we just fix it by, putting the verb in. Another example of that might be something like rubbish all over the place. Okay, this is a sentence fragment because we've got the subject, we've got where the rubbish was, but we haven't got a verb. So we need something like rubbish lay all over the place, or you can add more detail, rubbish lay strewn all over the place, whatever you like. But that would fix it if this is our problem. If the problem is this subordinating conjunction at the beginning of a sentence, then we need to add the clause after the subordinating conjunction, the main clause, to make it a complete sentence. So because Jane drove, it's got that so what feeling about it. Because Jane drove what? So you'd need to put a comma in and say because Jane drove, maybe it's explaining why she didn't drink at the party, maybe. Okay, because Jane drove, she didn't drink. And now we've got a complete sentence. Okay, so they are the two most common areas where we run into trouble. But just before I go on to some strategies and think aloud, I'll just point out one other area where we can run into problems. Okay, so here's that other area. These two sentences here, they're not sentence fragments because they fulfill the criteria, right? We've got the subject and a verb. But where they fall down is they don't really give us a complete thought. They're missing something. So sometimes a sentence needs the object as well to make sense. If you look at the first one, Juliet loves. It sounds a little unusual. We need to know the object of her affection. So in this case, if we put in the object of Romeo, then we get a complete sentence. Same with the next one, many people fear. We've got a subject and we've got the verb to fear, but it seems to be missing something. We want to know what they fear. So, it might be many people fear death, for example. So that's just a little add-on where sometimes an object is needed to make a sentence complete and make sense. But you can, for example, Jane drove, have just a verb and a subject making sense. It all depends on the context and what you're trying to say in your sentence. Okay, I'd like to move on now, and I'll create a second video for you where I look at when it's okay to have incomplete sentences, sentence fragments. Okay, they're not always bad. And also I'll do a think aloud to show you how to identify when they're okay and when they need to be fixed. Okay, thank you.